chose to do our 6-minute video on the music of Scotland. There are many different styles of music for different occasions in the Scottish culture. There is music for church, for mourning the loss of a friend or family member, for dancing, for social events, for storytelling, and for pure enjoyment. The current Scottish musical culture was started around the 13th century when European settlers traveled the world.
They brought the Christian church with them and set a spot in Scotland. This brought a new scheme of musical thoughts. Organs and lutes were set in churches to accompany trained choirs who would sing polyphonic hymns. Yet there was much contention, and in the 16th century, a Scottish Reformation would arise. This Reformation was quite heavily influenced by Calvinism and led to the opposition of the music within the church in drastic ways. They removed the organs and focused their music on congregational songs. Old polyphonic hymns were simplified to homophonic psalms. The royalty changed their accompanying instruments from the organ and instead employed bands of musicians who would play drums, bagpipes, fifes, trumpets, and other instruments.
The music of Scotland is not only defined by its plentiful and extensive history, but also by the instruments used to create the unique sound and tone of Celtic music, particularly their string and percussion instruments. Despite being a predominantly Irish instrument, the bodhrán was heavily featured in Scottish folk music. This type of frame drum was traditionally used in both times of war and agriculture, as the drum was notably featured during the Feast of St. Stephen. Here's an example of what a bodhrán sounds like. Scottish pipe bands were also renowned in Scotland and usually consist of a group of snare, tenor, and bass drummers along with pipers. These pipe bands have a military history and were considered serviceable positions within military ranks during wars such as the Crimean War.
Because of the lack of written records between Scotland and Ireland, what we know about the clarsach is held in common with both. The earliest surviving harps from Scotland and Ireland date to about the 1400s. For centuries, the harp was an integral part of daily life. The harper was held in great esteem in the life of the old clans. There are records of payments being made to the clan harper in the form of clothing, land, animals, and favors. The harper often told the history of the clan in his music and would sing about the history by the fireside, noting important births, deaths, victories, and defeats through songs and tunes. Traveling harpists in Ireland and Scotland were known to be at the focal point of rebellions, so much so that the harp was banned. The period starting from the 1600s during English rule in Ireland was difficult for Irish harpers, as the harp as a folk and court instrument was suppressed to prevent a resurgence of nationalism. Harps were burnt and harpers executed. This original harping tradition was extinct by the end of the 18th century because no music was recorded or written down to be preserved for future generations.
Now, if you're like me, I bet you've been wondering where the bagpipes fit into this scene of music, as they're usually the instrument most people think of when they think of Scottish music. Scotland's national instrument, the bagpipe, is not, contrary to popular belief, an instrument which had its beginning in Scotland. The bagpipe is an instrument much older than Scotland, and it actually started as an instrument in the Middle East, then traveled throughout Europe, evolving as it went, eventually reaching Scotland and becoming the Scottish bagpipe as we know it today. And for a long time, the Scottish used this instrument, their national instrument, the bagpipes, as the core of their music. However, as time went on, they continued to develop their music, and by the late 1700s, their music included many more instruments. And it was around the 1800s that the famous bagpipes began to fall out of popular use, being replaced by the violin.
Now, we have talked about the start of music in Scotland, the many different instruments that Scottish folk songs use, and how these instruments have affected the music today. One activity that they still participate in today is called a céilí. It is a social event that uses Scottish folk music, including the instruments that we have talked about for singing, dancing, and storytelling. I have had the opportunity to participate in one a couple of years back with a group of friends. The céilí was a lot of fun with dancing and spending time with friends. There are a lot of traditions from Scotland's history that are still celebrated today, like the Ceilidh. And there are many musicians that have learned and become great while preserving these traditions.
One Scottish musician that would change the world of percussion is Evelyn Gleaney. She was a pioneer in many ways, but most significantly, Evelyn Gleaney is completely deaf. She had lost her hearing by the age of 12, but decided then that she would become a percussionist. Although she couldn't hear, she could feel the vibrations of each pitch in every fiber of her body, often having to play barefoot. She faced opposition every step of the way. After all, how could a deaf musician succeed? But she defied the odds, winning countless awards, changing the way everyone saw music, and opening the door for so many like herself. Now, Evelyn travels the world, inspiring all to do the impossible. She has declared, "It's important to grab onto any opportunity that comes your way, but you also need to practice the art of creating your own opportunities." It's that attitude that has allowed a deaf musician from Scotland to truly teach the world to listen.